Looking for a home that keeps you connected to Silicon Valley without the usual barriers to entry? The Gates in Morgan Hill by City Ventures is a walkable neighborhood near downtown restaurants, outdoor trails, and an easy commute to the Bay Area. It's a small town setting with access to major career hubs. Every home is all electric with buyer-owned solar included. With limited availability, now's the time to take a closer look. Discover your new home at cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
The medicine has gotten better, but as in the founding era, I always say the worst thing that could happen to you is someone would call a doctor. It could also be George Washington, who would be like, oh yeah, let me take your terrible ideas and amplify them. You want to bleed me, which is a bad idea. Bleed me 7 more times because I love to go hard.
You've reached American History Hotline. You ask the questions, we get the answers. Leave a message.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
I like things my way. My coffee, my schedule, and my treatment. So I talked to my doctor about self-injecting with the Vyvgart Hytrulo pre-filled syringe, which contains efgartigimod alpha and hyaluronidase QVFC. It's injected under your skin, subcutaneously. It means I can inject in my space, on my time. It's my treatment, my way. Visit VyvgartMyWay.com. That's VYVGART MyWay.com. And talk to your doctor about Vyvgart Hytrulo. Brought to you by argenx.
T-Mobile is reinventing business internet with super broadband. Whether you run a small office or a factory of 500, connection is everything. Powered by America's fastest 5G internet, plus Starlink. Super broadband from T-Mobile reaches every zip code in the U.S. Super broadband, a new era of business internet. Visit superbroadband.com to learn more.
Fastest 5G network based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence Data 2H 2025. Speeds vary due to local network characteristics and management. Satellite requires hardware installation. Clear view of the sky with 36-month commitment.
If data management is slowing down your business, you need the Intuit ERP. If one entity is here, and one here, and one here, and one here, you need the Intuit ERP. If scaling your business feels like starting over, you need the Intuit ERP. Intuit Enterprise Suite is the AI-native ERP solution that consolidates, migrates, and automates, all in one place. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
This is Tab Ramos from Inside American Soccer. The Cup Knockout Round is now, and DraftKings has you covered for every single match. The DraftKings app is now available in all 50 states and includes all markets, bringing the game straight to your fingertips wherever you are. New DraftKings customers, sign up with code DK1, spend $5 to get $200 in rewards within 21 days. That's code DK1 in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Bet with DK Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, bet tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. 21 and over. Void in Canada. Event contract trading with DraftKings predictions involves risk of loss. Availability varies. Bet to get bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Trade to get $50 in predictions dollars that expire in 1 year. Issued every 7 days via click-to-claim for 21 days. One non-withdrawable reward redeemable. Predictions offer void in New York. Ends July 19th. Terms at dkng.co/audio.
Oh, hear that? That's the Spam brand, singing you a love song. Spam, sizzle, pork, and
Hey there, American History Hotliners. Bob Crawford here. Thrilled to be joining you again for another episode of American History Hotline. It's the show where you send us the questions. And the best way to get us a question is record it on a voice memo or maybe a video and send it to us at AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. That's AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. Okay, today's question is about history on TV. Here to help me answer the question is Alexis Coe, our old friend, New York Times best-selling presidential historian. She's got a book coming out soon, not yet, but soon, titled Young Jack, a biography of John F. Kennedy, 1917 to 1957. You can look her up and just order all of her books or any of her books, and you'll be very, very happy. Alexis, welcome back to American History Hotline.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we need you today. We really need your expertise for this one. Here's the question we're hoping that you can help us answer. It comes from BJ in Texas. He says, I just watched Death by Lightning on Netflix. I really loved it, but I kept wondering if that's what really happened. Can you do a fact check? So, Alexis, to start, let's provide a little background for our listeners who haven't seen this show. It's a Netflix limited series about the assassination of James A. Garfield based on the amazing Candice Millard book, Destiny of the Republic. Can you give me an overview of the series, and then we can start tearing it apart?
Yes. And I should say that I was so excited about this series that I've become this like accidental evangelizer for it, in which I have nothing to do with it, but I've written extensively about it, been on NPR about it. Now I'm here with you, and I couldn't be happier about it because you have two presidents who are relatively unknown in our collective memory. You have James A. Garfield, and then you have his successor, Chester A. Arthur. And they are coming about, there's sort of a surprise win. This is post-Reconstruction. We've got the sort of machine that is happening in Washington. People don't go to conventions, by the way, as an aside. It's untoward. It's not. It's frowned upon to even be advocating for yourself to be president, let alone going to a convention. FDR will be the first one to do it, and he'll fly there, and it's a really big deal. So Garfield goes. He thinks he's stumping for someone else, and he gives this incredible speech that says, and I think we would view it as incredible today too. He goes up there. He's a well-known person. Garfield has, he's a bit of a hero from the Civil War, not the hero of the Civil War. He's served in Congress. He's a classics professor. He's not showy. People were less showy then. I think a lot of our best leaders would not be elected today. He goes and he stumps and he gives this speech, and everyone is electrified because he says this is not up to Tammany Hall. This is not up to the political machine. This is up to the people. This is their president. The president serves the people. And we've got to remember that. It won't be decided here. And that gives people this license to vote with their heart and their conscience and their ideas about what America should be. And that, I think, can be appreciated at any time, but was a breakthrough then. It would be a breakthrough now. And that is but of course, there's a plot twist, which is that Guiteau, this man who fancies himself a real supporter, a real booster of James A. Garfield and gets him elected, when in reality, he's just a person who was a fan, who was, felt, I think we could really understand him now as sort of through the lens of what we call the male loneliness epidemic, but also obviously some mental illness as well. And so he gets it in his mind that Garfield, he needs to avenge his own sort of belittling. He didn't get a job. The exact thing that Garfield said he was going to stop doing, which is the spoils system, which is handing jobs out. Guiteau is upset about. Guiteau retaliates. Garfield dies in this brutal way over many months. And then Chester A. Arthur is ascended to the presidency and surprises everyone. And so this is the entirety of the 4 very crammed episodes.
Right. And so this is 1880 is the convention, the Republican Convention of 1880. So we are past the Civil War, but it is still palpable, right? Where the nation is trying to bind itself back together after this unprecedented rupture. And the man that Garfield is stumping for is Senator John Sherman.
Who we don't really remember today, and that's
but he's the brother of William Tecumseh.
Yes.
And if you read that period, he's one of these names that, this is the beauty of historical discovery, is that most people know who William Tecumseh Sherman was, but people don't know about John Sherman. But he was a very powerful politician. He serves at one point as Secretary of the Treasury. He serves as Secretary of the State. He very well could have been president, except for the context of this moment, which was, like you said, giving power back to the people, right? It's like, and so Garfield, he gives a speech to give power back to the people. And here are my two frames of reference for this, watching this, right? So here I am, I'm like you, I got some historical knowledge. I've read the book. I'm watching episode 1. They're setting it up. My two frames of reference that I'm carrying with me watching this are, of course, Destiny of the Republic, which I read when it first came out. So it's not French.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's been probably 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. And Sarah Vowell's Assassination Vacation, where she covers Guiteau.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are my two frames of reference. So let's break down, kind of talk about episode 1 for a minute.
Yes.
Garfield doesn't want to go to the convention. He feels like he has to go. His wife, and this is like watching the television adaptation, his wife's like, essentially says, look, just don't become president. Go. I don't want you to go. We got a lot going on here, but look, just go, come back, and, don't say anything that's going to make you president. What were your thoughts?
Well, so it's interesting. We should back up and say that my standards for nonfiction couldn't be higher. I'm the American history columnist at the New York Times, and I think anyone who's read one of my reviews knows that they're not, I go pretty hard, right? But when we are looking at a creative adaptation, I really respect other people's mediums, whether it's music, it's television, it's movies. And so I'm willing to come to it with an open mind, right? And I think that what this series does, and the reason I was excited about it, because these are presidents that no matter how well known I get, I just have a hard time getting people interested in them or even being allowed to talk about them. But then you get to this opening scene, and there's a scene before the convention, and that's where they really got me, right? Because there is, this really happened. There was a warehouse, and things get misplaced all the time in the archives, particularly if they're not to do with like Abraham Lincoln, for example. And so this jar falls out of a box and it starts spinning, and these workmen pick it up and they look at it and they go, oh my goodness, there's a brain in there. So even if you don't know anything about what's happening, like, of course I was like, oh, it's the brain, it's the scene, they find the brain. But if you don't know about it, you're so excited. And I think that's what's really effective about this series, is even if you sort of take issue with something, if it's not quite as it was or supposed to be, you're excited that it's very clear something is happening and kind of everyone can get it. And if you've never seen it, if you don't know anything about the story, you're just like, what is happening with this brain situation? And so I think that's sort of this wonderful moment. But then we do get to these moments like with Lucretia, and she is Garfield's wife. And she doesn't say that in real life, but she has to sort of introduce the audience to what's going on. And from that moment, I'm really excited because I have to admit, I'm suspending disbelief, but this is also like an amazing cast. Usually the cast is a little bit funny. Sometimes it's like seeing a bad production of a Shakespeare play during the summer. You're not quite convinced that everyone knows what they're saying. But this was, I think, from the moment you step in the convention hall, there's stuff that's not quite right, but I don't care. I'm just so excited about this moment. It really captures, okay, what are we going to do? Because not only are we at this point in history, but we're at this crisis point in the Republican Party, right? We're at this crisis point in which they need to figure out who their leadership is. And that's something we can also really relate to.
What did you think of the depiction of the wigwam? And that is like the convention hall where this convention took place, also where Lincoln's 1860 convention takes place. It's in Chicago. What like when you're watching shows like this, like I'm thinking of the John Adams miniseries on HBO, and so you see these like interpretations of these places, like urban history, right? Like the place where these things happened. What was your thought when you saw the depiction of the visually the wigwam?
Well, it's interesting because we don't really have buildings, you don't see these kinds of buildings as much anymore. And when you do, you're just not as impressed. But there were these buildings that were across the United States that were like made of glass, or they were really dramatic for the time period. We're less, we're sort of a nerd to impressive architecture at this point. But things took incredible effort and time and plans. The scale was sort of unheard of. So you have this convention hall, and there are tons of people in there. Of course, there aren't a lot of women. They're going to be on the upper, if they're allowed in at all. You have this excitement. And I was really sort of thrilled for that moment. And I loved seeing everyone packed in there. I was at that point a little bit distracted, like, oh, I don't know if that would have happened. That person's not there.
Well, just pick one out.
Well, I mean, for example, you have Blaine, who is also up for
James G. Blaine from the state of Maine. There's a couple songs and rhymes about Blaine out there.
Yes. And I feel like he's a little bit better known, but still is not let's say a household name from this period. And you have him like really there also stumping for himself, being really in the thick of things. I really loved that. What was not true for me is Chester A. Arthur, who will become Garfield's vice president. And he is sort of he's second to this guy named Roscoe Conklin, who's
the dastardly Roscoe Conklin.
Who's like a very fun character, particularly in New York. But he is not the devil incarnate, but as far as party politics, kind of.
He's an operator.
Yeah. I mean, he's the operator, not only on a local level in New York, which does control, it's always been a capitalist city, and so, of course, it's going to have its claws in DC. But you have him really, it was a little bit more artful, a little bit more removed. But you have him there, in almost every scene, really, as if he is like a chief of staff. And you have you have also, so you have Conklin, and then you have Chester A. Arthur.
Well, before we get to Arthur,
yes.
By the way, and for people who are listening, you can't see this, but my good friend David Childers, who some of you know, he's a great musician. He paints the figures and he does the war reenactments with the things. And years ago, every year he sends me a few. And years ago, I'm holding this to the camera. There is Chester A. Arthur right there. He is. He only sent me Taft and Arthur. So anyway,
that's a really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully he's not trying to send me some kind of a message, but I don't think he is. But we're going to get to Arthur in a minute because he's a big. We really need to break because most of when I read on social media or people have reached out to me. And I had people texting me, did he really blah, blah, blah? So we'll get to that in a second because that seemed to be the biggest one for everybody. And by the way, Nick Offerman I think he did a great job as Chester Arthur. And he's an old friend to me and James because he was our Andrew Jackson in our Founding Son, John Quincy Adams, the series. So like really awesome, great actor. And we know he loves history. And so it was really great. To see him in that role. And he did a great job. Okay. Conklin. He is definitely, whoever wrote this, and I'm sorry, I don't have the screenplay writer's name at my disposal, but whoever adapted this for the screen, you got to have a bad guy. And Conklin is the bad guy.
He's such a good bad guy.
He's a great bad guy. And, when I've read this period of history, he is you kind of do sense he's a little slimy.
Oh, yes. I mean, you do not want your fate in his hands. You don't want anything in his hands.
So talk about him, who he was for a second.
Yes.
And then how he's depicted. And is there any distance between?
So he is, he runs this place called Tammany Hall, which is a political machine out of New York that runs everything. And basically, if you want a job, if you want a service, if you want in any way to benefit from the government, you have to go through this guy. And it's not like a nice request. It's not what we see with like Lincoln and all these other movies where you have office seekers coming. This is a really normal, really frustrating part of an early president's job. It's sort of like, who am I going to give a job to? How much time do I have to give these people? But with Roscoe Conklin, you have to go in, you have to know someone who knows someone, and then you have to come in with some cash. That is just very well known.
You need pay to play?
You need to pay to play.
Oh my God, I've never heard of this.
Never
And it's
heard
not like it's happening like right now.
No, not at all. It's no shock of recognitions here. And so then you have this guy who has, a lot of trusted deputies around, and one of them is Chester Arthur, who we're not talking about yet, but he does install him in the Port Authority. And so if you imagine, let's take a step back. What does the Port Authority have to do? Well, at a time when shipping is pretty important, that's where all the goods and services are coming in and out. That's a lot of money. If you're looking for some kickbacks, like that's really, really good. It's a sweet position. And so he is known as someone who can kind of buy everything, but you don't know what to do about him. Right. He's in this way a little bit Trumpian, where you're just not sure where the power ends and what will eventually bring him down. It's got to be something somewhere, sometime. Everyone's run ends, but you don't know. And so he does seem kind of impervious to the laws of the land and all the different sort of basics that appeal and apply to everyone else.
We should note that the role of Roscoe Conkling is played by the actor Shea Wiggum. He did a great job. So
the whole cast was so good. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Everyone was great. And there was, I should say, also sort of a darkly funny tone to it that I thought worked really, really well.
Yeah, like, how do you feel about, sometimes I don't like this, and meaning 95% of the time, even though I'm a musician, I don't like modern music in period films. I don't like it. I do not dig it. It turns me off. I wasn't as offended in this for some, maybe I'm getting old and I'm just, getting accepting of some things, but they do a lot of that. Like they are trying to, and I give them, I understand why, because here you're telling a story about 19th century politics. And by the way, if you want to read some crazy 19th century politics, read New York City politics of the 19th century with the Tammany Hall and the Albany Regency and the Bucktails and the Loco Focos and the Barn Burners. I mean, they've got the best nicknames, and it's some crazy, crazy politics. And this is what the stew that Roscoe Conkling and Chester Arthur kind of come out of.
And there's the visual too. And I agree with you. And it's hard. I know that, if they had said something like dude, I would have a problem, but they certainly, with language, it was not the parlance of the time, but I felt like what they were doing was made to make it more readily understood by people who are watching. And, my feeling always as a historian, and the way I get good with all of this, is I basically say, well, it's not the end game. What we hope is people who didn't know about Garfield and Arthur, which is, I think, a lot of people, are going to hopefully, in my mind, view this as a jumping off point.
Right.
So
exactly.
Start there, and then they're going to go elsewhere. I think also, though, what I try to do is think, well, okay, yes, some of that was a little bit silly. It wasn't quite Marie Antoinette, where it was kind of I don't know, almost the Ramones or something like.
Right.
That it wasn't quite that bad. But what I did really appreciate is they stayed true to the things that were important to me. This was not my biggest issue. I'll tell you what my biggest issue is in a second. But the thing that I did love was the hair during this time. Like, everyone was hirsute. They all had these incredible, and Chester Arthur in particular had like the best mutton chops, and just facial hair, weird beards. Like, it's almost like a beard, like a chin would leave the coalition beard. All sorts of things were going down at that time. And their dress was sometimes very what they would call dandified, right? So they were
Conkling's a dandy for sure.
For sure. And actually, Chester Arthur had something like 75 pairs of pants and 4 shirts. And that's the fact that really I turn in my head about, I don't know, every few months.
And that rivals Martin Van Buren, who
Yes.
also was really into the way he dressed and was a dandy.
And also had great mutton chops.
and had big money.
Yes, and was a New York sort of part of this machine. So you have all this. So I didn't mind that as much. I figured, okay, I get the general vibe. I'm going to forgive it. I will say that sometimes I felt like, oh my goodness, this is just a lot packed in. My problem was not how they spoke, but sometimes, and I'm still on the fence about this, and I know Candace Millard, who is the author and the historian, we spoke, and she's not. She liked it. So I have to accept it's her baby. So she, we feel when you write nonfiction, it's not like you didn't invent these people. So while you feel really protective over them, you also realize they don't belong to you. They belong to everyone, which is how it is with a book. They're kind of like children, they just go off to school a little bit earlier. You see them on socials. You hope that they're making good decisions. I think you've heard me say this before, but you don't know, you have no control. And so I think that is something that I feel the thing for me was, if you notice, Garfield's wife was incredibly prescient, and she seemed to sort of know what was going on at all times, had the best things to say. That's because her words, she was like 5 different characters in one. She was 5 women in a trench.
Oh, composite.
Yes. And she, I don't want to say erased, but absorbed one of my favorite, because it's so random and weird, characters, a woman named Julia Sands. Do you know who?
Okay, who was that? I don't remember her from the book. I'm not remembering.
I wish so. I will plug your book, which is coming out in March, and you're coming to New York.
Yes.
And we are doing an event together, and we will not have time to go do this, but I hope at some other point that I can take you to a cemetery in Brooklyn, and we can go visit Julia Sands' grave and a bunch of other people who are buried there. I love a, cemetery in general. You name a city, I'm like, Memphis, Elmwood, let's go there. There's all, I'm just in love with all of them. But Julia Sands was, so Arthur ascends to the presidency, and everyone's like, oh no, Conklin is basically president now. But Arthur, who's a widower, he gets this letter from a woman named Julia Sands, who lives in Brooklyn, who's in her early 30s, and she's what they called an invalid. So she is unhealthy. She lives with her parents. She's not going to get married. Has no connection to politics, and no connection to him. She just writes this random letter to the White House and says, everyone is expecting you to be the most corrupt president we've ever had. What if you were the best?
Mm-hmm.
What if you just did the opposite? Just putting it out there. What if you just aspired to be as good as the office in which you were elected? And he does. And they strike up the weirdest correspondence. And he goes to see her at one point in Brooklyn, and her parents are like, why is the president here? This is weird. I know it's not an affair, but I'm not comfortable with this. And they have and he really credits it as being a major influence. And so you have just this random person who reaches him. And they cut her out. And they put her words in Lucretia's mouth.
One of the things I do remember from Destiny of the Republic is that Garfield had a 3-year-old daughter who died.
Yes.
And that affected him deeply we think about this time period and how many children would die, how common that was. And we need to remember that it wasn't just like, well, we're going to make 10 babies.
No.
5 would live. We're okay with that. No, it wasn't. It was not okay. It was not any more okay than it would not. It would not
across the board. People always say, well, you had a wife, your wife died, then you got another one. That's fine. And it's like, no, you had to, but you still really miss. It's a numbers game. You just simply can't exist on a farm without a significant other, which is when someone decides not to marry, like George Washington's, the subject of my last book. George Washington's mother didn't marry in order to give her kids as much as she possibly could. And it put her in a terrible position in which she was fighting in a court that wasn't going to recognize her as a human being who had the right to be there, all sorts of things. But yes, so you have a sadness for sure.
Right. And a compassion. And to me, watching the series, I was like, they really build up Garfield's capacity for compassion.
Yeah.
And to me, I attribute that coming from that experience in part from his child's death.
What's up, fam? I'm sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together and iHeart Women's Sports.
Because let's be real, Women's sports is giving us way too much to talk about these days.
The highlights, the rivalries, the breakout stars, the moments that take over your entire timeline.
And the conversations that start during the game and somehow keep going all week.
Every week, we're breaking down the biggest stories across women's sports.
We'll give you our takes, our debates, and probably a few disagreements.
We'll talk to athletes, celebrate big moments, and get into what's happening on and off the field, court, track, and beyond.
Because we're not just interested in what happened, we're interested in why everyone's talking about it. Because everyone watches women's sports. So if you're already a fan,
or you're just getting into the game, there's a seat for you right here.
Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Hoda Kotb, host of the podcast Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb. Okay, if you know me, you know this. I'm always searching for inspiration, for support, and useful tools to help maximize joy. So this podcast lets us uncover all of that together. We're going to have these meaningful conversations with the world's most fascinating people, like when actress Olivia Munn shared how she overcame fierce health challenges that she never saw coming.
I've gone through breast cancer and then helped my mother through breast cancer, and that was more difficult. There's a lot of people who understand postpartum depression. I was not prepared for postpartum anxiety.
Olympic champ Shawn Johnson revealed why she had no choice but to be a gymnast.
There was something about gymnastics that was intoxicating to me. It's given me a belief that we all have one of those treasures inside of us. We just have to find it.
Listen to Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke and Yerin, Samira y Gracie. I'm so excited.
On the bouncy bed.
You have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to Suite 305, where the group chat comes to life. What up? Es como que una forma de decir como, hola amiga, hola mejor amiga, hola hermana, what up?
Mira, nunca lo había hablado con nadie. Excepto con mis hijos. Mis hijos sí saben.
Yes. Sé mi amante.
Uf. Punch. Qué increíble. Ya la telenovela.
You're the only person I know that loves a yellow starburst.
It's lemonade. No hay alguien que te falta, como que tú dices, me gustaría colaborar con esta persona. This is Suite 305. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons as part of My Cultura podcast network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with the one, the only, and the one, Michael Bublé.
You guys, I'm genuinely a huge fan. Like, it's funny, you know, I made a whole thing about doing this TikTok where I got you guys to sign the guitar, but right. It was real. Like, we listen to you in the car all the time. Like, it literally is hanging up with all your signatures.
Wow. I am so honored. After Kevin's recent, let's call it interesting confession about Michael, I had a feeling this wasn't going to be going away. We figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they're like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal. Like, what a man got to do? What a man got to do?
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Do you have a hockey rink in your house?
I do.
Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on my podcast, Disgraceland, I tell the stories behind music's biggest names, the moments, rumors, and real-life events that help shape their legacy. Like the story behind Sonic Youth that starts with downtown New York cool and ends with album art inspired by a true crime. Sonic Youth was not fronted by a groupie hustling alpha like David Lee Roth. No, Sonic Youth's Thurston Moore was an artist in love with a fellow artist who just happened to play bass in the same band with him and his other artist friends. Her name was Kim Gordon, and Thurston and Kim were every bit as cool as the couple on the cover of Goo, the same couple involved in one of the UK's darkest true crimes. Disgraceland is part of the Exactly Right Network. Listen to new episodes every Tuesday, bonus episodes Thursday, and rewinds on Sunday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is American History Hotline. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Today, my guest is Alexis Coe, a New York Times bestselling presidential historian. She's got a book coming out soon entitled Young Jack, a biography of John F. Kennedy, JFK, 1917 to 1957. Also, check out her biography about George Washington, You Never Forget Your First, and check out her Substack. Follow her on her Substack. She does a lot of great content. She's working 24 hours a day so you can learn and know more about American history. Today, we're talking about Garfield, not the lasagna-loving, Monday-hating cat, the president, James Garfield. Remember to send us your burning questions about American history. Email AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. That's AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Okay, so the character that I received the most text messages and noticed on social media, the most people commenting on, was Chester Arthur, portrayed by the actor Nick Offerman. And the scene in particular, you talk about trying to draw comparisons to today. Well, who among us hasn't been with a friend in the back of a New York City club when your friend is vomiting after a night of partying, right? So we notice that Chester Arthur has an alcohol problem, and he is one night, I guess during the campaign or after the when he becomes vice president, and here he is in the back of a restaurant or bar in New York City, and he's throwing up, and he crosses paths with Charles Guiteau, the man who will assassinate his boss.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have problems with any of this?
So much. This was hard for me. So yes, a lot of it is true. Would Chester Arthur be in a New York City restaurant, bar? Yes. Would he be indulging and possibly? Yes, everyone was gross. Everyone is still gross. These are things. I was at Old Town Bar last weekend. Someone was throwing up outside. This is still a very common scene in a New York. You're going to see a breakup. You're going to see someone throwing up. This is why it's the greatest city in the world. I'm told.
All the scenes of humanity are being played out before your very eyes.
There's nowhere to hide. To hide. And so that's all plausible, right? But this was one of the issues that I had. There are a lot of interactions, and I'll get to Guiteau, but there are a lot of interactions that are happening between Chester A. Arthur and James A. Garfield that never happened. In general, we know, if you know anything about the presidency, everyone knows that the vice president, as John Adams once called, is the most insignificant role. There have been exceptions, just like there have been exceptions to bad first sons. You know, we have a Beau Biden, we have a Quincy. We don't have a lot of others. I just ran out. And so you have these axiomatic things that are true of the presidency, that are true of every era, which is that the vice presidency is just not around. But in particular, James A. Garfield was not excited to have someone like Chester A. Arthur, covered in soot, if you will, to use sort of an image of the time. He's a compromise. He is probably his 100th choice, if that. And so there's very little interaction, but you constantly see it in this series. You constantly see Garfield looking at Arthur and being like, you're going to be better, right? Or like, you can do this.
There's a good man in there. I know there's a good man in there.
Didn't happen. And what also didn't happen is this continual sort of almost meet cutes between Guiteau and Arthur. And one of them happens, there's a scene outside in which Guiteau kind of gets his butt kicked. There's another one in which, they meet at the club. So no, those were really frustrating moments for me.
Guiteau, can we just establish this? The Guiteau and Garfield, did they ever physically cross each other's path before he assassinates him?
As far as we know,
physically.
Yes. I mean, I think so, because Guteau was such a what would they in Clueless, they would have called him like a stage 5 clinger. Like he was just always around and trying to get an audience. And so it is believed that he did, but in no way was he a welcomed entity. And, had someone seen him again on the street after such a meeting, they would have crossed the street.
Right. It's a sad, I've in the book he was more of he's a sad character, and I can't remember the actor's name. He's in a lot of things. He was in Succession.
Adam. He was Mr. Darcy, Bob.
Yeah. He's really great. He's a really great actor. He did great. He was perfect for it. So to just button up Arthur here, Arthur does make a turn.
Yes.
So talk about that.
Well, it's funny because you think that it's all about, Garfield makes the turn. You think that it's all about Garfield not having what he called presidential fever, because we see so many people and we're like, I always think who would want to be president? But, he didn't sell his soul to get the job. He might have been great at it had he not been assassinated. So that is the closest thing to, let's say, the promise of the New Deal level reform in federal governance that we have from James A. Garfield. He's going to change the whole system. It's not going to be a spoils system, meaning you're not going to just get to pay for play. It's not going to be the dais at the inauguration in 2025. And instead, what we have here is Garfield has this moment, but then you have Arthur really, taking that baton. And so a plea for conscience from, I think, America becomes a mandate. And the question is, today, I keep thinking about with this series, do we recognize the difference between moral conviction and the machine that devours it? Right? Because so many people see as being kind of swindled. And it's I think there is a fine line between hearing this rhetoric, and particularly when someone seems really genuine in it, and seeing the forces behind it that are going to ruin it for you. Even if you really believe it's the best thing, it's still not going to happen. It's the other half of the country's nightmare.
Yeah. I saw a good friend of mine a couple weeks ago in New York City, and he's a journalist, and he's covered Trump for decades, back to the Apprentice days and before that. And he said to me, the thing that Trump knew from the start that no one else ever kind of realized was really how weak politicians are, how weak of people they are, how much of a pushover they are, and also that everybody has price.
Yes.
And that is the context for this series, of the time, this is why it's been so powerful and people have connected with it, because, and I believe that you could pull many episodes, and as you do, this is why we do what we do, because you can pull many episodes from history, and history doesn't repeat. Maybe it doesn't really rhyme exactly, but people don't change. And so you do see these characters that kind of are born, reincarnated again and again and again, and are reborn and reborn. And I think that personally, that's what I found so powerful about this.
Oh, absolutely.
Is the moment. Yeah, is the moment.
It's that moment. And I think that's true across the board. I think whenever I go to DC, I testified before Congress in the spring, and I was, it's so much worse up close is the real terrible part. There's just no there there. They're not really serious people, but they're in charge of the most serious parts of our lives. I think that's also true for historians, though. I mean, you name it. Proximity to power can be enervating to you as a person. And so sometimes I'll be really excited about a historian who's coming up, and I'll see them kind of take a job where, they're forgiving, I don't know, slavery, or you will see them do whatever it takes to maintain ties to certain organizations that are fundamentally deeply racist. And then, which is not to say that one doesn't take risks in general, and that working across aisle sometimes is really necessary. So certain things, when I saw Mamdani in Trump's office, there was nothing shocking about that entire interaction. Or,
Right.
when I am in DC and I'm at my bipartisan think tank, I'm going to walk right over and do an interview with the Reagan Foundation, because that's good for history and because we can find points of connection. So it's difficult, because then we also have the Cold War, right? In which people who were so vulnerable to McCarthy, sometimes it was because they were really getting in the backs of cars and trying to have real conversations that would save hundreds of thousands of lives.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you look at things and you're like, ooh, I don't know if you're not the moral upstanding citizen that I thought you were and representative. And sometimes it's for good, but very often it's not. And so I think that's what you saw so much, is you saw really the oily people that are now, they look different. They're men and women, but they're not that different. You see how pliable they are, and it does.
That's the word. That's the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Malleable and pliable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we could go on all day about this aspect of it, but let's move on, because there's another main character we need to spend time on, and that's Charles Guiteau, the real villain, right? He's the real villain because he is the guy who murders the president.
He is a villain, but don't you also feel, and maybe this is because I'm from California, Reagan, there was a point in time when he had a sort of a war on mental illness and mental health. And, he released so many people who were struggling with mental illnesses onto the streets. And then you have a lot of violence that ensued. And this has all been documented and, figured out that this, A leads to B kind of thing. And so it's difficult because you see him and he's funny, right? He's dandified the way they all are. He talks in a funny manner. He's so desperate to matter. He is trying to ride this moment, but he's unexceptional. He just thinks he is, right?
Yeah, it's like he has as a person, he seems like he has big dreams and big aspirations, but he doesn't know how to put in the work to make them really happen.
Which is, unfortunately, as you know, the most important part of being successful is, you have to have a good idea. You have to have a lot of elements, but you have to make your own luck, right?
Right.
The most important part of luck is you have to make it through sustained efforts, which often feel like they're going to kill you. So when you said, before she's working 24 hours a day, it's like, sometimes it feels like that. I don't really, the concept of a weekend is not, if I need to be there to put out a fire, and that fire is someone saying they're going to run for a third term or whatever it is, I'm there. That's what I'm doing. Whereas other people are sort of like, I don't know why I'm not the most successful historian in America right now. Right. And so you do have to do that. And Guiteau, what we see is someone who has these delusions of grandeur that is in some ways so American, right? Again, I'm from California. What do you do in California? You declare yourself to be something, and then you are. That's the entirety of the gold rush. We're all rich. No, we're not. There's no one making any money. But you have this, there's nothing more American than saying, I'm going to do this. And we would call it manifesting. It's sort of, there's this line, right, that you cross. And that's when we see what happens, because you see him basically losing ground the way you see anyone when they're becoming more and more desperate. I forget, there was an Andy, there was like there are always these movies about hustlers who are running out of time. They're running some sort of business. Something happens, and then they're just out of luck. They get
eventually the moment of reckoning comes.
Yeah,
right?
They run out of money. They run out of time. They lose a finger. Whatever it is that's going to happen in this, and that's what you see happening with him. But it's that he's gone on decades. He's convinced his sister that he will be something. She's defended him against her husband and their family. And you just see him running out of options, and everyone sees him. So you see a desperate man blended with some mental illness that's gone untreated and would have been misunderstood anyway at the time. But it's so recognizable.
Right. And what was the 2024 election partially about? It was about the man, what is happening to white men? Like, what is the experience of white men? And, and the, this masculinity wave and the defining the role, a group of men trying to redefine who they are, and the manosphere.
But like checking out of society. This is sort of the
Yeah.
interesting thing is so often this has been the case in American history in which a group of disillusioned men, because men have dominated politics for most of American history as we approach 250. It's just a reality. You have these disillusioned men who have checked out, but then they find a way in, right? They start a competing coalition. They do something like that. But what you have now is someone more like Guiteau, which is you have people who have checked out of civic service and they have checked out of spaces in which they could meet women, in which they could cultivate friendships, in which they could through real effort, because they're sort of hiding behind screens and it's easier to feel as if, well, I don't belong rather than doing the hard work of belonging. And it's not, the thing is, it would be very easy, but then they're encouraged to sort of, by these influencers. And in some ways, we have the commander in chief who is our greatest influencer. You have,
There's good, yeah.
Yeah. And so you have these people who become easily disillusioned. You have that in Guiteau so clearly. And he wants to jump on this train, right, of civil service reform. But then in his mind, he is, to be fair, a rich man, right? So a rich man, like, let's say John F. Kennedy's dad, when Kennedy was in school, when he was in college, his dad wrote a pamphlet. Well, he paid someone, Arthur Kroc, to write a pamphlet for FDR. And then he's like, okay, FDR, where's my job for having gotten you elected? And FDR is like, okay, how do I get this guy to be happy? I give him an ambassadorship. That's what you usually do. But the difference is that, half ambassadors are legitimate diplomats. They deserve to be there. They're very good at it. And the other half are like, they paid to play. And Guiteau,
Right, the founder of Home Depot.
Exactly. And Guiteau, though, and sometimes it's that you paid, and sometimes it's that you really were just that influential. Like you have I guess in the White House now, a version is Laura Loomer, right? A conspiracy theorist, confusing character in general. But we have Guiteau, who hasn't done any of these things. He's not rich. His pamphlet that he wrote was fine. It wasn't influential. He was just a guy who was excited about a candidate, which is like the rest of us. It'd be like, you ordered an Obama shirt and then you're like, Obama, where's my job? Why aren't I an advisor? And so Guiteau obviously doesn't get anywhere. And then he thinks, oh, I elected a fraud. So Garfield isn't who he said he was, but I believe Chester A. Arthur is for some reason. And this is where you really see, because I believe in Arthur and I know things that I can tell you from Arthur's youth that portend that he will be better. But for the most part, if you're betting on a horse here, it's not Arthur. And so you do have this where you see Guiteau in this way come apart, and it's sad, and that's the thing. It's a sad moment, the way so many of these moments have been sad. It's like, if you look at the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, we have a similar situation in some ways. You have John F. Kennedy. You have these men who really are so desperate to be involved and for grandeur and for greatness, and they just can't be because of themselves.
The tragedy, there's a lot of tragedy in the James Garfield story itself, but the tragedy is that he's shot, but he doesn't have to die.
Oh, this is the worst. So
this is what I remember from the book. I just want to set up here, like you read a book and, time goes by, and if you don't reread it, you lose part. You can't, you just don't remember parts of it. But what I've never forgotten is, I think the book maybe opens with this. It's the 1876 World's Fair or Exposition in Philadelphia. And Joseph Lister, so Alexander Graham Bell has a table or whatever set up. He's like at the front of the convention hall. He's featured. Way in the back is Joseph Lister, if I'm getting the name correctly. And he's telling people, hey, there's bacteria and we need to clean things and, disinfect things. And that becomes, like, of course, in a great book, foreshadowing, because then Garfield is shot and he dies by infection. He doesn't die from the bullet. Is that right?
Yes. And we should know this. The thing that was so terrible to watch as a person who is this was already a debate that was going on in the medical community from the Civil War, because you had so many limbs cut off that did not need to be, in part because of infection. You have a woman named Dr. Mary Walker, who was the first woman to be a doctor, and actually she had her pension taken away after the Civil War because, of course, sexism. But she is known for trying to stop this. And so these debates have been going on. Doctors have been aware of infections and bacteria and dirt and all these things for a while, but there's still a lot of people who are resisting. Medicine has gotten better, but as you know, in the founding era, I always say the worst thing that could happen to you is someone would call a doctor. You could also be George Washington, who would be like, oh, yeah, let me take your terrible ideas and amplify them. You want to bleed me, which is a bad idea. Bleed me 7 more times because I love to go hard. And so you have this Guiteau. So Guiteau shoots Garfield in a train station, very dramatic. But he doesn't need to die. And they don't know this at the time. There are a few ways this goes awry, right? One of the ways is that they could have just left the bullet, would have been fine. Sometimes this happens, but it goes against all logical thinking. Even for me, I'd be like, I don't know, maybe we should get in there.
Hey, Andrew Jackson, didn't he live with a bullet?
It's just a better idea in a lot of ways. But they also then at the same time are aware sometimes you have to get in there. So young Hickory, James K. Polk, didn't live with a bullet, but he lived with many other diseases. And at one point they had to get in to remove a gallbladder stone. And they did that by, really dramatically ripping open his private parts. And it's pretty gruesome. I wasn't prepared to tell that story, but
Oh, are they also in a jar in some Smithsonian warehouse?
Another day, but it's a good one too. But so it's just, and he had a terrible, recuperation as well. And there are lots of moments in which people are not going to make it perhaps, and it's totally unnecessary. And so we have Garfield, who maybe could have made it if he'd been left alone, or if someone had just washed his hands.
Right.
And instead you have a physician who is of the old school. You have a team of them. And once in a while you have someone who comes in and who says like, I don't think this is a great idea. Nope.
You're fired.
Nope. The man who is in charge thinks, dirt is seasoning or something. And so you have this, you're watching it and you're thinking this man is being, and it's not like, oh, a day, 2 days. We're talking about 4 months. It's torture.
Let's end on a more
not torture.
Yeah. No, yes. Let's end on let's not end on torture. Let's end on what this series is doing for the cause of history and American history in general. It seems to me it's kind of sparked a little bit of life, because you have this coming out at the same time as Ken Burns' American Revolution docuseries. And so it's kind of it's history's having a moment. You think producers are going to begin to look for, I don't know, let's do an 8-part series about young JFK, or hey, let's do a series about John Quincy. I mean, you think like this could spawn a couple more of these?
I hope so. It would be nice if it wasn't the same people over and over and over again. I've been in all the CNN presidential docuseries, and I feel like they just rotate through, and we have a lot more. Why are we doing the same 6 people? I think what this gets right, that I'm not sure the rest of them do actually, for all the issues that I've already said, I would actually take this, and maybe I know too much, I'm too close. I would take this series over Ken Burns' Revolution, because I think it conflates and sort of flattens the distinction between the revolutionary ideals and the war itself, which happens a lot. So we're kind of going back in time in some ways. So it's not really progress. Whereas I feel like this is really progress, and it works because it doesn't romanticize the era. It does because it's just fun in this way that you have great actors and it's like a fun vibe and people are a little bit ridiculous, but it shows the grotesque and noble in equal measure in the way that life does. You see people, you watch TV, you see, oh, that's a terrible figure. That's a good one. And it's coming at you all at once. So it holds on to this like Garfield's got this ethical spine the whole time, even when he's, in an angle of repose. But he's not a saint. We never think he's a saint. We just think he's a good guy. He's not solving crimes and, everything. So, and again, he didn't accomplish what we hoped and dreamed for him, but we believe he died a good man. And it also, I think, threads Arthur's slow transformation. And that's something that I think is so astonishing at any point in American history, but in particular now. It's like a fever dream. And so I think that is what helps. And I think that what we do want in general is someone who is untouched by the system.
So what you're saying is Ron Chernow is going to write a book about Chester Arthur.
Well, okay, first of all, Alexis Coe should write a book about Chester Arthur.
Well, I was going to say that, but I didn't want to be on the nose.
The most exciting thing about this is that there have been so many times where I've said, what about Chester Arthur? My agent has been like, do you want to make your mortgage payment? And,
right.
It's just not happening, whereas I feel like it could happen right now.
Oh, it can happen now. It's happening now. You got to get out
now.
There. It is. There might be 3 of them next year.
There might be, and there's no perfect Chester A. Arthur book. I think Zachary Karabell wrote a good one. Full disclosure, he's on the board at New America, but we just had dinner. But I really always loved his. But I think that there's a moment where we need like a real, maybe Bob, like we need like a really good. I don't know if you have another project.
I have an idea, and they're in New York. Okay. By the way, last night I was looking up the relationship between Thurlow Weed and Roscoe Conkling, and it wouldn't be Thurlow Weed fascinates me, but they did know each other, but we'll part 2. We'll do another one of these, and
as an aside, these names are obviously amazing. I think it's all about just finding a way to sell it, which is the hardest thing. But this is a huge step forward, and so I am happy, and I think this is good for America when we don't have. This is in no way again supplementing or taking the place of real history. But if it can get you excited and people are watching it, this is good news for everyone.
Are you, as a historian, are you allowed to say who you're working on or thinking about working on before you do it? Or are you supposed to keep it a secret so other people don't steal it?
So this is a personal journey, but I don't really fear about. This is the nice part about having a unique perspective and getting into the point in your career where you think, oh no, no one can do what I do, which is nice. Right. So I'm not fearful of it, but I, in general, try not to talk about things that I'm working on.
Right. Yeah.
Not only because it gives me heart palpitations and like when someone's like, how's the book going? It's like, I didn't come here to fight, but I do also feel like the more you talk about something, the less you do it. And it's good to just sort of sit and think about it and work on it and not.
I agree with that.
It's like you just sit here for a year and you come back, not with a revenge body, but like a revenge book, I guess.
Right. No, yeah. And so I'll tell you offline.
Oh, good. Okay. Yay.
All right. Well, this has been great. I've been talking to Alexis Coe, a New York Times bestselling presidential historian. She's got a book coming out soon that she can tell us about because it's like really coming out soon. Young Jack, a biography of John F. Kennedy, 1917 to 1957. Alexis, thank you for joining us again on American History Hotline.
It was so much fun. Thank you.
You've been listening to American History Hotline, a production of iHeart Podcasts and Scratch Track Productions. The show's executive producer is James Morrison. Our executive producers from iHeart are Jordan Runtaw and Jason English. Original music composed by me, Bob Crawford. Please keep in touch. Our email is AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. If you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Feel free to hit me up on social media to ask a history question or to let me know what you think of the show. You can find me at Bob Crawford Base. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential, and it's also elusive. But now, there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst. It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
30 years ago, an island off Manhattan almost brought down New York City.
Who will you trust? Your friends and neighbors? Or will you trust the people 5 miles overseas?
This is a story about neighbors turning on each other and what happens when a forgotten place decides it's had enough.
But we're not stopping, are we?
Listen to Revisionist History, The Staten Island Problem on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.